Right. So thank you all for going ahead and listening in a little bit on the Gridiron Club. Many of us know about the Gridiron Club, and certainly there's been enough Rotarians who have been honored and who have been cast members and writers and involved in it. Then again, hopefully everybody has a little bit of an idea. But as is frequently the case, most people only have a little idea. So as such, just wanted to give a little bit of the history of the Gridiron Club and why it exists and how it came to be and you know what it is. So in New Canaan, we've always had a great tradition of service, and there's a lot of organizations that do service. We're sitting in a group right now that, of course, does that. The Gridiron Club is about celebrating service. So there's always there's dinners that honor people, and there's honorary tribute to sort of things. And this was really meant to be a different way of going ahead and honoring service and hard work and contributions to the community. Started back in 1961, and Bob Bliss who was our state senator, who had also done a whole bunch of different volunteer stuff. And they decided, hey, we got to go ahead and do something a little bit more. And the head of the Advertiser, one of the original guys, Paul Killian. It wasn't Paul Killian. It was Carlton Hilton, who was the head of the Advertiser, was retiring and going off to a different job. And so you had Bob. He got together with a guy, Paul Killian, and then also some other likely New Canaan names such as Carls or Kellys or Cody's and Meads and some other folks, and said, okay, we're going to do an honorary dinner. And at first it was going to be sort of a roast, and then they said, well, let's go ahead and do something a little bit different. And they decided to go ahead and make a full play out of the guy's life. And there happened to be a whole lot of people who had a bunch of talent in New Canaan. Since then, that's kind of gone away. And by the way, being derogatory toward the Fall Guy to the Gridiron Club is a big part of the Gridiron Club. But there's a whole bunch of people who had talents where it ranged from I believe it was the creator of The Wiz, the musical. There was somebody had actually told a story that when he first got to New Canaan, he went to a gridiron dinner, and there was a video. And it had this guy who was imitating like one of the big news anchors of the day. And it's like, man, this guy's a dead ringer. And it's like, well, that's because it was the news anchor who happened to be a New Canaan resident. So there's been a lot of talent over the years and a lot of different people who have been able to put in their contributions and really kind of raise the game. So with Carlton, again, the original dinner was on February 2nd, 1961, and it was called the Groundhog Day dinner. And you're like, okay, well, fine, that's right around that time, and we'll call something different. Next year, they ended up switching it around and it actually became the Gridiron Club. With that, and again, they decided upon the doing a play instead, and always using just the pure locals to go ahead and do the play. So we did no imported talent, nothing paid or professional except for the musicians. Everything else is just from the pure locals. And it was also following the British tradition under the fact that really only men should be on stage, dressed however they're supposed to be dressed under things. And so that kept and again, of course, we don't really believe men dressed on stage, but adding to the humor, in case you've ever been to one of these, it's very important that the men play the women role, because otherwise half the humor is gone. I mean, it's just that we're counting on that in order to work. Following up after Carlton Hilton, Fall Guy was Leslie Young, who would run the Board of Finance and done, again, a whole bunch of other great things. Each year in the program, they actually list out the different members, and we're trying to go ahead and put together a true biography on each of them a little bit, just as to why they were honored, to help to remember those traditions. Izzy Cohen followed, and then Bob Bliss himself got it. And Bliss, who was a resident until he was 86, he died at 87 in New Canaan. He'd been basically a lifelong resident. He'd run the town council, he'd run town committee, Republican town committee, been a state senator, and been involved in countless other organizations. He too ended up being honored. And out of that first group of 140 invitees to the first Gridiron Club, 30 went on to become Fall Guys. So it's just interesting how, again, it attracts different groups, and it is a little bit incestuous, but who knows? Honorees have gone across every single category. I mean, politicians, lawyers, home builders, car dealers, marketers, politicians, I mean, you name it.
And now women.
And we ended up cutting the front of this. You steal my notes under this stuff? And we ended up, of course, honoring our first woman last year with Tucker Murphy, which was very much deserved. And again, what we're looking, so the way that a Fall Guy is selected is all the prior living Fall Guys get together, and you create sort of the list, and you end up doing a secretive voting process in order to determine who should be worthy of receiving this next honor. And for those of us who have sat through it, it's really kind of tough, because when you go through the people in New Canaan that deserve to get honored, it's a long list. I mean, there is a lot of people who do a lot of things around here. And it's very difficult in order to go ahead and decide who and how and what the balance is, and go through a couple of different rounds of voting, and eventually the smoke goes up in the chimney, and lo and behold, we have a fall guy. So that was sort of the process that happened with Tom this year. But it is impressive, and we have sort of helped to almost track a list to make sure that we don't lose track of some people who have done just so much inside of the town. It's kind of a humbling process to go through. Let's see. So originally we ended up having the group was very loosely formed. The only condition of membership, which remains the only condition of membership, is that you just buy a ticket. So if you buy a ticket, you're a member of the Gridiron Club for that year. So there's not a whole lot that goes into it. We don't need someone like Keith. We just want to have the people show up and actually participate. Back in '91, of course, the attorneys got a hold of things, and they said, wait a minute, no good group can possibly exist without having some sort of a status and designation, and so we became an official 501c3, and the funds that are raised get to be distributed, whatever funds we raise, after making sure that we pay off our bills, because we don't like to be in the red under these sort of things, and having a little bit of seed money for the next year. All of the funds get to be donated to the Fall Guys charities. And not surprisingly, the vast majority of New Canaan charities can go to good causes. The process for doing creating the show is rather intense, and there's a good group of people together where it starts with researching, and that's when the researchers go and they call up your friends and your family and everyone else and see who gets to dish. And it's different. So you end up having God's frozen chosen Episcopalian Hobbses, where we don't really sharing a whole lot of stuff out there, to the Carls, who it's oh, we can't go on long enough. I mean, Leo's show could have been like 9 or 10 hours. I mean, it's just all the things come out on there. And so the researchers go ahead and they dig up all of the stuff. They help to sort it. It goes to the writers, and then it's put to music. Then the directors get together. You try to recruit the cast. Who can actually carry something, and who has to be background, and how do you deal with this in order to get something that is fun to watch and actually good enough under the talent side. I mean, the humor and the acting and all that goes together, but let's, for example, I will never sing something there, and that's a good thing that saves everybody an issue, so we'll work for that. Let's see, so one of the things that that was interesting again, is you get toward the male-female side. Not too long ago, it was actually a all-male event. A long time ago, it was an all-male event. And then, of course, wives and other women wanted to go ahead and sort of see what the show was about, too, because it's about someone's whole life. So there was a segregated women's night and then men's night. And then, not too long ago, probably 5-6 years ago, we ended up going co-ed. And there's pluses and minuses to both. I mean, one of the reasons that for the men's show is that, in case you didn't know, men, we're pathetic under our social lives. I mean, if you leave it to us to organize things, it just doesn't happen. You don't have the friendship stuff. And so here's a guy's event, and everyone shows up, and not organized. There's no centerpieces. I mean, no seating arrangements, anything like that. It's sort of I don't know. And lo and behold, you go ahead and you meet a bunch of different guys, and you sit at a table with some people you might have heard of before or anything else. At the end of the night, you go, these are pretty cool people. This is great. Now, of course, again, in today's age, having the co-ed ends up being much better, and having husbands and wives together, or couples, and the more tables. And by the way, women laugh a lot more at this stuff, so it helps out tremendously on the part of the cast and crew. And not to mention, under the men's side, so a bunch of guys get together. They tend to drink a lot. Average age maybe 65 to 70. By the time you get to the show, guys are falling asleep. So women help to keep us more active and actually being a much more responsive audience, which works out much better for the cast and the crew. So they actually get the better responses on things. And I mean, that's actually most of what we, most of what I have under the event. Has anyone here not been to a gridiron show? All right. We have a couple people who will end up being neophytes on this. But sorry, Ken?
Well, the name gridiron, isn't that a reference to Saint Jerome, who was fried to death by putting him on a grid of metal and was burned to death?
Sounds like
Was that intentionally the roasting of the fall guy is a
So-
reference to gridiron?
So this is a new one, and by the way, I like your story better than the one that I had heard. I mean, that sounds actually really cool on
I'm
that.
just asking.
I believe that in Washington, the gridiron name comes from Washington D.C., the D.C. club.
Right.
And they used to go to a steakhouse that ended up having gridiron steaks that ended up having like a pattern toward them. But I like the Saint Jerome one. I think that's a much better story than this. So I'll just play one quick clip, and this comes from the closing act or scene. Sorry, the closing scene from Tucker's most recent roast. We are trying to get more of these up online. We're trying to go ahead and get some of the greatest hits. And again, it's for any who attended my Fall Guy stuff. I mean, their opening one was just wow. I mean, they knocked it out of the park under total inappropriateness and just overacting the whole works. It was awesome. But here we go with a quick one for. You can record that. We'll get the full introduction for a second. So this is a quick setup on this. For those of you who know Tucker, Tucker tends to be pretty forceful in trying to go ahead and make sure that things happen and they work out the right way for everything for her and her friends.
Chain gang, Chamber of Commerce, cheap shots, laughs, tears, hoots, a drag show, off-key singing and scary dancing. We've seen it all tonight. There's nothing left but the kick line and a speedy escape to the nearest cocktail to try and unsee all these guys in their dresses tonight. Of course, you don't have to see it again until next year. We hope you'll be back for another heaping helping of gridiron hospitality next year. Well, by now I'm sure, or I hope, they're ready. So fellas, let's say goodnight to Cinder effing Rella. Our closing's here, and so we face our final curtain. Friends, we've had some cheer, we laughed so hard, our sides are hurting. We're done, we're tuckered out, it's over now, but as she'll say, next time, let's be clear, just do it my way. You see, I've been in charge, I run this town from top to bottom. I've shown what I can do, big brass goals, you know I got 'em. I'll run this show next year, you'll follow me, or hit the highway, you'll see, I'll make it clear, you'll do it my way. Oh, there it is, now we're on track, we'll get it right, they'll all be back.
A lot of dance lessons here.
We'll look ahead, forget today. Tucker Murphy will stand and say, you heard my call. You took the ball and ran it my
And almost everybody does.
Forget it today. Tucker Murphy will stand and say, you heard my call. You took the ball and ran it my way.
So I think that helps. Again, a great one that just sort of shows the good-natured humor towards stuff. There's insider jokes. It's also very
Talent is not required.
well. You end up having it is funny that a couple of guys, every once in a while, you recruit some folks who you're like, Dave actually can sing, which just makes the other guys like, oh, okay, okay, now we get this sort of part. And as traumatic as it is, like actually seeing these guys up on stage as they're dressed, I've been in the dressing room. You can't unsee that. When they're getting ready for stuff, it's just, it is kind of terrifying. And going along, I think, again, the good-naturedness of all of this, where it is meant to be a velvet touch, it's a velvet glove, not a mailed hand or anything like that. Occasionally something sneaks in that's a little bit of a lower type blow, but in general it ends up being a top one. And it is fun also seeing when, especially like with Tucker's friends, I mean, the amount of times that they would crack up at the inside jokes, which then helps everybody else to understand that it's like, okay, I get this and how this really plays into that person's personality. So. And I think everyone hopefully knows in this, but I mean, Keith Simpson and also Leo have been fellow guys over the years. Any questions or thoughts or observations or memories that you all have from past dinners? Or?
Well, they always seem to end up doing the can-can, don't they?
You have to end with the kick line. I mean, this is a musical. How can you not have that? There are some of the other traditions, and like there's the pink squirrel drink will always come up, and don't ever have a pink squirrel. They used to actually know how to make them, and they're awful, just awful. So you always try one and say, no, this isn't happening again.
Is Eric in the show this year?
Eric is, I think he might be directing. So Eric managed to con me into going ahead and caught me in a moment of weakness to take over the presidency side of the Gridiron Club. And hopefully we'll be able to, again, continue to sell out the dinners that we are, and just, it is a fun tradition again, and just being able to help exemplify one of the things that makes New Canaan so special, which is the fact that you got a lot of people who do a lot of work around here, and being able to do something kind of fun in order to recognize that. You know, again, unfortunately for only one person a year, whereas you could easily do 10 of these. I don't know who would attend 10 of these things, but you could. Leo?
So Scott, I'm just gonna interject. I know in the middle years, it got to a point where one of the things that the Gridiron Club tried to do in alternating honorees, there was a group of people in town that they were called the Ridgies. They lived in town, but they mostly commuted to the city and worked in the city. A lot of them knew each other from the train commute. They did volunteer on boards at night and stuff, and did stuff around town. And then there was the townies, the people that lived in town, worked in town. And so for a lot of years they alternated roasting a Ridgie or a townie, because a lot of them were members of the country club, but they were in two different cliques. The people that commuted to the city and knew each other, and people that were local. And so that was sort of a tradition for a lot of years. That's morphed now where it really is down to just service, and like Scott said, it's like voting for the next pope. There's a lot of names that get circulated, lots of little handwritten ballots that go back and forth, and then when the white smoke goes up, you gotta fall back here. So it's a fun process to be behind the scenes. And the best thing about being a former fall guy is you can do anything you want from that point on, and it'll never make it on TV. Side benefit.
There might be an encore for the Carls. They have a lot to say, so.
So it was 2 nights and now it's one, right?
No, we're doing 2 nights now, which really helps out in that it makes it so that, again, there's always conflicts, so some people can't make it. The 2 nights offers that up, and for the cast and crew, it's like, doing all of this work for one show is A, really risky because you don't know, and then 2, just getting in front of the audience, again, you get to sort of morph it a little bit for the second night and change around for some of the stuff that works, and everyone feels better under it, and so it's, we still want to get out there and really push this to everyone and make sure we do try to sell out, because that does end up raising the money.
Have the tickets going on sale, actually?
I think they go on sale Monday.
Soon?
Yeah, and we'll put out the link to that.
So if you could, selection panel could pick a retired Deloitte partner like me, a CPA from a Midwestern state, I guess it's vote for the rest of them.
There's hope for everyone, and again, it's tough as you try to go through a process under, whose service is known by enough people that this actually works. How who else is on there? Is somebody leaving? Did somebody have a lot of service? And then and then hasn't for the last 4 or 5 years, but they, just missed under a road. And the process isn't fair. It's just, you have to try to figure this out. And then the other part is like, do they have a sense of humor?
Yeah.
Because if they don't have a sense of humor, it's like, this is not the right way for you to be, honored. Yes?
Maybe I missed the question earlier, but has anyone ever turned down the honor of being recognized?
There's every once in a while you have a turn down because it's like, that's great, I'm out of town. And the one requirement for the fall guy is like, you gotta be there. That's all the fall guy has to do.
Right.
But if you can't be there, then that doesn't quite work, and again, that might mean for something in the future.
But it's really never a situation where someone's like, I'm gonna be too embarrassed by this, so I don't wanna do this.
It could have happened over time, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's been a couple over the period, and I've only had, I am technically, I will always be the longest serving fall guy, because I happen to be right before COVID. So, I'll always hold that over the rest of everybody else. But I've only been around, it's only since 19 or something, and again, this goes back 40 years, and again, I'm sure lots of people had other things.
You may not want to answer this one, but how many former fall guys participated in the selection process?
I think we had
We
12?
were about 8 of us around the table this time.
No, I think it's more than that.
But
I think
then,
we had-
yeah, but some weren't there, so I would
Yeah.
think there's about 12
That's pretty good.
full guys around, including Tucker, yeah.
Yeah, then we put it, and people can of course go by proxy, and you try to keep everyone in the
Right.
loop under this stuff, and of course then some of the older fall guys don't even have a cell phone, but, try to figure that part out.
As an anecdote, I was one year thrown in to be the prompter, guy who ran the prompter, and they're down at the bottom, because Kirchhoff got sick or something like that. And so you're in a side room, you can't see what's going on, but you're watching this thing scroll down. And I did something, and I don't remember, but I started going backwards. The funny thing is, it didn't matter, they just kept right on going.
Look, live theater is always just a lot of fun, and there's other volunteer spots out there, and again, always looking for people to help out, and it just, being part of it is, under the theater stuff is, well, deal with it. Figure it out, make this happen, and of course Bob's a great MC, and he's able to go ahead and run with stuff and help on those.
I'm just gonna ask about Bob. He's been doing it for a long time, and what would you do without Bob? He's the master of that.
It's somebody else figures it out, and the next guy gets up there and you start doing the shtick, and it's again, he's been great at doing that, and it's again, a lot of people have put a lot in here, ranging from the Kirchhoffs on the teleprompter, the people who helped out on the costumes, again, which is just traumatic. It's awful back there. The costumes, the writing is really good, and I mean, coming up under the songs and stuff, and one of the great truths about comedy is volume makes up for a lot of quantity. I mean, if you only do one song, it better be good. If you got 8 or 9, it's like, a couple of those may not be the best, but then you end up having a couple that are hits that really end up being fun. And
Usually about 15 or 16 songs.
there's a lot of, it's a lot. I mean, it's an hour and a half to 2 hours sort of show, and that typically works pretty well.
Have any songs been used like multiple times over the years, obviously with new lyrics being subbed in?
It has to be, yeah. I mean, there's a lot, and some songs like lend themselves much more toward, this is a great parody song. And then some, and what's also, I mean, just again, when you think under the talent side, which songs can actually be adapted to what personalities, and so into which circumstances. And you gotta have a big repertoire of really understanding what those songs are, where they come from, how you can sort of modify and play with them, and it's, again, it's a cool creative process.
You ought to put St. Jerome on your
We'll get the giant logo, it's just being toasted and all. And by the way, this is the official gridiron tie, so those are for sale periodically. I think, sometimes we run out for, again. Now with Tucker and Tracy Carl, we're much better at actually being organized, but before that it was very dicey.
Has anybody taken this to other towns, like kind of copied what you've modeled?
I don't think so. I mean, under one sort of silly anecdote about making New Canaan special. So during COVID, I was went to the Shake Shack in Darien, and the system was down, all sorts of stuff under order, and you go in, and there was a guy who was somewhere in the spectrum trying to run things, and people would come in and people would start to get upset and start doing things. People would be in and out and be confusing. And I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm waiting for my stuff. It's not anyone's fault here. And so as people came up, I just sort of go, hey, look, the system's down. They're working on this stuff here. Just give your name over here to this guy, and then just go ahead and wait for a minute. And I said, okay, good. And then you start talking to a couple people, and literally someone said, it's like, where are you from? Because you can't be from Darien. You're way too nice. Wait, why wouldn't somebody? I mean, this is clearly a situation that just needs a little bit of help. And in a place like New Canaan, again, it's, and I think other people will also bring this up. I mean, we have a really, really, really strong culture of volunteerism. At the town recognition awards that have only recently started, was a huge thing that was necessary. I mean, there's people, I mean, Judy has served under, I don't know, 75 different committees, keeping this town great all the years and stuff. I mean, it's hundreds of things, and occasionally people, it's like they sort of retire and move away, and everyone's like, wait, what happened to this person? And so having those functions where you actually get to, recognize and acknowledge that somebody put in their 15, 20, 30 years doing stuff that makes the place better, which is cool.
I can detest to the fact that.
Not so fast, Ben. Chill out a minute.
No, even being foreign born, you're not safe from it. Laszlo Papaniah, the two foreign born survivors of the gridiron.
And Keith actually has the recognition part where his show was tough because his friend that did his stand-up comedy side just started out. You're sitting there going, like, well, that's it. Just shut this down. We don't need anything more than that. I mean, he was a spectacular, just deadpanning and putting out a great tribute to you, which was fun.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that the Gridiron Show happens on a couple nights in the spring, but the process starts probably the summer before in choosing a date, because the date's locked in first, and then the former Fall Guys get together usually early October, late September, early October, do the voting, smoke clears, and once they know who the honoree is, there's a group of people behind the scenes that are writers. They're really talented guys that have the ability to take lyrics and put them to song. And they research the Fall Guy like October, November probably, and they start writing in December and probably January, and then the cast of characters that you physically see on the stage start rehearsing probably in February, and the show comes off. So it actually is a lot of things happening with a lot of different volunteers, not just the ones that you see on the stage, but there's sort of a little army of talented writers and people behind the scenes that do stuff. So Tom's had his.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
What really added to it this year was I found out and was asked at the Lobster Fest, at the Banco Pool, by this young man over here.
Yeah.
And he did say, you want to say yes or no? Of course, it was a big yes. But it just was so neat to have it happen that night.
Yeah. And last year was actually a little bit tough in that we had lost Steve, and then we lost Richard Bailey Stewart. We lost Bailey Stewart. And actually, I was under sort of a sad story under a little bit of stuff, as I showed up for one of the rehearsals right after we'd heard about Bailey. And meanwhile, I had a lot of stuff going on with work, and so I was just out and I was just listening around the area, seeing what's going on. But eventually, Bob Dorn came out and said, like, for God's sakes, at least smile for them. And I'm like, oh, geez, my head was so out of the game. I was just sort of like watching and listening, and I was just not in the mood to respond under the audience side. And then after that, it's like, oh no, I actually have to laugh and pay attention and do stuff, because otherwise the poor guys are on stage. It's like, wow, we're tanking here. This is awful. Like,
Well, that's right. Bailey Stewart was a Fall Guy with his brother Dick. So,
yep.
And the program on the front had the picture of the two of them on a motorcycle, looking like the worst nightmare motorcycle guys you could ever imagine. It said "Double Trouble" at the bottom. It was a fantastic show.
Yeah.
It really was a fantastic show.
Any other questions or comments or recollections?
Date, time, location?
Pardon?
Date, time, and location?
We're
25th, 26th?
25th, 26th of April, Country Club. Yeah, and so we'll get out the information under that stuff, and again, tickets are gonna go on sale. You can buy individual tickets or buy a table of 10. And we used to like put tables together, and then it took like Tracy Carl like weeks to go ahead and have people keep trying to say, no, you get your table, you deal with things.
We're actually setting up rotary tables. I sent
Yeah.
out a sheet and we're gonna have a few tables, and that was when I thought it was only one night. So once the thing opens up, I'll be collecting the checks from everyone, because it's just made out to Gridiron Club, I assume.
Yes.
I assume, and I'll collect them all, and whatever night you wanna go, and you'll be seeing with all the Rotarians. So I'll set that up, so depending on availability. So please, I hope everyone comes to see Tom, and we can see what they're all talking about.
All right, John?
I think what's really interesting for me is I get to know somebody who, like, I've known Tom, many years in a professional setting. I know he's worked as a chief administrative officer in town, but then I get to learn more about somebody. It also, I think, what the great thing about the Gridiron Club is it celebrates New Canaan the way it was and how it's evolved. So in learning about the story of Tom, or say a Joe Rucci, and you start to learn about his early life and what brought him to town as an FBI agent, as a young man, and you remember that, New Canaan wasn't always the way it is now, and how it's evolved over the years, I think has been really a really great portrait of the man, and now woman, and a portrait of the town and how it's evolved over the last several decades. And it's the only opportunity we really have to look back, during the year. So I just think it's a really great celebration that way.
It's fun.
I was going to mention too, for those who don't know, some of our own are going to be up on the stage. If you didn't recognize, Bill Walbert and Rich Townsend were two of the chorus line.
Oh, I didn't recognize them.
Let's just say it's good for everyone that Bill Walbert has an outlet. Because otherwise it'd just be, who knows what else would end up happening in this world. Super, well thank you all very much, appreciate it.